Welcome to another episode of the Embodied Union podcast. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Lindsay.
And today we're going to talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability in relationship.
Dun, dun, dun. It seems like something that's just like, yeah, of course you would, but the actual application and what it actually takes is fucking massive.
Well, I think it hits up against all of these parts that we have, like our fear, our not enough, our want to get it right. And for most people, this stuff is quite unconscious. So it's like, yeah, I'm vulnerable. But when it comes to the heat of the moment, like, what does being vulnerable actually mean? Because the lack of vulnerability is often what causes relationship breakdown.
That's what I see time and time again. Like, you know, I work with men, and men and vulnerability have had a really hard time in the last 30, 40, 50 years of being modeled vulnerability as a man and all these sorts of things. So it's like, we want relationship, we want connection, we want to be loved, we want to be acknowledged and respected, but we don't want to do it with vulnerability. We want to try and work around that and get it some other way, and it fucking hurts.
And it just completely dismisses the full spectrum that it is to be a man or a woman or a human. Like, there's so much pressure to show up in a certain way, especially for men, right? And it just, it dismisses the part that actually desperately needs vulnerability to create connection and to heal these parts.
It's kind of a big part about love, is being vulnerable with your own feelings, with your own felt sense. And the hard thing is, if you're not vulnerable with yourself, how are you going to be able to be vulnerable with another? And I think that's what we're going to jump into. So like
Yeah, I think it is the same with everything that we talk about, like the skills of relationship. They all require a certain level of self-awareness, and vulnerability is no exception. Like, you have to be into self-development and looking at your own patterns and what's playing out so that you actually can acknowledge your own internal experience. If you don't have awareness, then you're operating on autopilot, and it might even be like, I am vulnerable, I told you how I felt. But it's like, there's a difference between vulnerably sharing and just projecting blindly.
Yeah, or just like almost like throwing it out there and running away, like being quite detached from it, you know? And then the other side is like pseudo vulnerability. It's like, I'm gonna pretend to be vulnerable, like I'm gonna share things with you that I know how you're gonna respond to that vulnerability. It's like, it'll be big for you, but it's not big for me. But it's gonna seem like I'm being vulnerable as well. There's always like a bit of protection around this vulnerability. Because to be honest, true vulnerability is fucking terrifying.
Oh yeah.
It's terrifying.
For sure. I'm an example of, I am vulnerable. I know that I'm being vulnerable. But when it came to actually being vulnerable inside of our own relationship, I think it was actually the first time I've ever been vulnerable. And it's excruciating. It actually causes like the feeling of excruciating contraction and pain to actually expose these parts of myself that I've kept a lid on for so long. And as much as it is excruciating the first time, it gets easier, and how rewarding it is makes it easier to do. But I think you just spoke to it. So in relationship, if a couple's not being vulnerable with each other, what does that look like?
Not taking responsibility typically looks like really not talking to each other around like the truth or what's really going on. There's like a level of facade or a mask, and it sort of manifests in not quite feeling connected to. It's like, I really like them, but I'm not getting intimacy, I'm not getting closeness. There's not this, I want to see inside of you, I want to be with you in this, you know? So I think in a way it's a felt sense around vulnerability. And in my experience, it's say, not having it is my partner just not able to take responsibility for their part in something. It's like a complete lack.
Self-responsibility.
Of wanting to and claiming that they are, but then when it comes time to, it's like, it's not actually happening.
Well, I think this is the trap that lots of people fall into. I'm sure most of us want to be vulnerable, but in the heat of the moment, we really want to defend ourselves.
Yes.
We want to defend the part that's playing out. We don't want to be made wrong. We don't want to have done the wrong thing. We want to get it right. And this is why we need that level of awareness to know when that's playing out for us, so we can be like, shit, like that part of me that I really want to defend is here, but I want to let you in.
Yeah, and I think that the best way to sort of reframe that is, instead of defend, it's like that part needs protection,
Yes.
or it needs somebody to care for it and to see me or witness me in that, where I can be co-regulated with. So it's like, not all of me is not vulnerable. It's just the really deep, hurt, exiled parts of me that I need to bring out and show you so then they can be looked at and they can be loved. Because it's like, I don't want to show you that in case. I don't want to let that part be more hurt. I don't even know what to do with it. And I think this is the beauty of relationship, is those exiled parts that we put away years and years ago and forgot about, our partner will love those parts. You
And
know,
that's how we
can-
heal them. That's
That-
ultimately the healing journey of relationship.
Absolutely.
I think it would be cool to share the experience we had with a client recently, the story. No names, but
Yeah.
I think it really paints the picture of lack of vulnerability and how it can lead to breakdowns.
Yeah,
So-
and there's no shame in this. It's
Never.
more just like awareness.
Yes.
It's like, if I have an experience of feeling really, and I'll use it as an example, but I'll sort of like speak into it, and I'll use me as the example. So it's like, if I feel really uncomfortable about something that I think you've done, I could either go to you and speak to that, like, Charlotte, I feel really insecure about something, and my desire is to maybe go through your phone or go through something of yours to confirm my like anxiety. Or I can break a promise and I can go and look myself to try and confirm it and try and get the evidence that confirms my
Limiting belief?
Yeah, limiting belief,
fear?
anxiety, the past hurt, the distrust, whatever it is. And I've got a choice to go two ways. I can either go the route that I've always done.
Check the phone, check the thing,
Do the
buy
thing.
into the fear,
Yeah, and do all of
avoid
that.
vulnerability.
Yep. Or I can go to you and I can be vulnerable
You can
and
expose.
and yep. And this is around shame too. So the unwanted exposure, disappointed expectation can happen, as well as the exclusion. So it's like these sort of tie in with each other, of like, the vulnerable thing to do is to actually go to you and go, I want to do that. I'm not. I'm just really
Scared.
feeling really scared. I have fear. I have some unsafe part of me that feels like I'm going to lose you, or we're going to break up, or whatever the fear might be. And so instead of doing that, I'm going to try and do it on my own, and that breaks trust.
Well, I know my experience with you, having done as much self-development that I have this idea that I shouldn't be jealous or I shouldn't be insecure, and I'm putting that pressure on myself. When I notice that part has come up in the past, I had that decision to be like, well, I can just kind of like try and brush this under the rug and manage myself and self-regulate and do a terrible job, and it's going to come out sideways and I'm going to be in a mood. Or it's like I actually let you in and say, I feel fucking jealous and I feel insecure and I feel like these parts are ugly and shameful, and I don't even want to tell you this because I want you to have a different vision of who I am, but they're here.
Yeah, and I think what's really important to step in vulnerability in relationship is, can I hold that and not dismiss you when you do that? Because I think people want to be vulnerable, but then their partner dismisses their vulnerability. So if you were to come to me and say that, and I go, I'm not doing anything, and I then get defensive, it kind of reinforces, well, coming to me when you're vulnerable and like really like open to something being different, if I can go, I really get that, I really feel that, like, I'm so sorry that's your experience.
You're validating. You're not necessarily saying that there's evidence to support my fear, but you're validating me in my experience. And you can really see in the way you just articulated that, how a child who didn't have the freedom to bring their fears or big feelings, who was shut down, don't feel like that, it's not a big deal, then learns the pattern of, I can't be vulnerable because the other can't hold it.
Yeah, if I go to my caretaker and it gets dismissed, I'm just dismissed.
What's the point?
My vulnerability is not welcome.
So
it's not welcome
lack
in the
of
world.
vulnerability is absolutely learnt behavior, which means it can be unlearned.
Yeah, we bring it into our relationship. I guarantee anyone listening right now has their relationship with vulnerability has been tainted, or molded before this relationship, but this is the relationship that you are currently in, where you get a choice to heal it and make it different, instead of just being on the same loop and feeling that slight bit of disconnected and wondering if they're the one. That person that you're with will never know if you're the right person or the one if you never fully show them who you are.
I really love that. It's like we all have this deep desire to be connected to, but what are we willing to show of ourselves? It's
To be
like,
connected with.
Yes, yes. Vulnerability is sexy.
It is, and so often this is people wonder, like, how do I spice up my relationship? And it's like,
Emotional intimacy.
have you tried being vulnerable with each other? Because it does. There's the 3 phases. There's the enchantment, the honeymoon phase, the disenchantment, which is the conflict phase, and then there's this beautiful re-enchantment, vulnerability, nakedness, realness in the relationship, where it's like, this hasn't been working, or you know what, I've been not being entirely honest with myself, and as a result I haven't been honest with you either, and I'm like, I want to make this work, I want to let you in, whatever the conversation might need to be to really make a difference, you know, because people are looking for this attachment style and polarity and all these other
And it's
things.
all super valid, but it's like, it actually is more basic. If you're fucking up the basics, like connection and vulnerability, trying to throw polarity on top, it's like, you really got to start right here.
Yeah, I want a DM relationship. It's just like,
BDSM.
yeah, I'm gonna like throw some spice on this bland bit of wet toast. It's like, it's not it. Like, make it good to start with.
So I think for a couple listening, it's like, all right, there's some work to do here. The first part is having that level of self-awareness, starting to get really vulnerable with yourself, and then starting to have some big conversations and being courageous and being brave, knowing that if what you want, if you're a stand for the authentic re-enchantment and that deep love, get vulnerable with each other. Start acknowledging what's coming up for you in real time in the moment, rather than making it about whatever your partner's saying or doing or not saying or not doing. It's like, we're really just needing that level of awareness. What's happening in me? And how can I share that with you without making you wrong for the experience that I'm having? That's vulnerable.
Yeah, and then taking that and really taking that person's courage of being vulnerable and validating it, you know, in that moment. They don't have to be right, but can you just appreciate your partner's courage of vulnerability and have that be a positive reinforcement? Because it's a snowball. Once you start being vulnerable with each other and start to like do that, it's like, oh, it gets to be good.
That's the thing. Like I said before, it's excruciating the first time, but then I start gathering evidence for how it's held really well, how when I expose these parts I'm ashamed of, they actually then lighten. And then I'm having evidence, and the snowball effect is happening. It's like, okay, cool, what else can I reveal? And yeah.
Gets to be thriving, gets to be great in relationship. And I think one of the best ways to set this up powerfully is like, okay, you can have the thoughts. I think thoughts are important, and like you can be in your head around it, writing it down so you can formulate more of a broader thought around what it is that you're wanting to be more vulnerable with, or what's happening in the relationship, so you can see multiple ideas and kind of see it in a bigger picture way, which the brain doesn't really hold that information that easily just in its head. It's good to write it out or see it.
It also slows us down.
Absolutely, slowing down is important. And then setting it up powerfully with your partner, whether it's once a week or once a month or whatever it is, like that relationship check-in that we talk about, that skill of, I don't have anxiety to bring it up, because we make sure that we talk to each other seriously once a month about where are we at, what are we doing, you know? There's
also the way that we do it, which really suits me, and it suits the fact that we work together, live together, is we have a clean as you go policy. And this might be my anxious attachment, but it's like when something comes up, I'll always check in if you can hold space. Well, I'm learning to do a better job of that. But it's like, let's clean as we go. Let's clean as we go. I don't want these things to build up. Like, lack of vulnerability is unspoken words.
Yes.
And they're creating blocks in our relationship. We can't see the blocks, but we can certainly feel them, and we definitely feel them in the bedroom. Like we were saying before, if we're not being vulnerable with each other, intimacy is impacted.
Big time. Anytime that I'm not expressing my sad or mad, it builds resentment, which is calcification for intimacy and our, our love lives.
Well, the biggest block to love is the accumulation of unhealed, unresolved hurt. So vulnerability is the antidote, and it takes a level of awareness, self-responsibility, self-regulation, and the willingness to hold your partner
Yeah.
in their vulnerability as well. It's like relationship is a collaboration. It's really, if there's one person listening to this and it's like, I'm going to start being vulnerable, it's really, you need to sit down with your partner and have a bit of a plan. Like, we're going to try this
An
together.
agreement.
An agreement. That's
Yeah.
it. That's right.
Which is what relationships are really based on, is agreements. It's like, we agree that we're going to do this together, so there's not one person just trying to be vulnerable and the other person's attacking that vulnerability.
Not a big deal.
Yeah, so I think that's it. I think that's just
I think that
punchy
sets
one.
it up quite powerfully. If you guys have questions about vulnerability, if you need some mediation space, sometimes when a relationship has a lot of accumulated pressure and
Yeah.
unhealed hurts, just to try and sit down and be vulnerable can be a bit of a shit show, really.
Oh, so much can come up if it's
When
been a
there's-
long time. Well, lots
So-
of water under the bridge.
So much water under the bridge. So it can be supportive to have someone like myself or Lindsay or whoever is your go-to to mediate that for you and get you in the practice of sharing in this way. So you know where to find us: Embodied Union Instagram,
Lindsay
the
B.
podcast, Lindsay B. I am Charlie S. Hannah. I work with women.
I work with men. I also want to thank our special guest today, the chicken.
Bali Live.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys all next week. Love you, Critter.